ahead and get started. We are in Isaiah chapter 46. Okay. And if you'll recall, last time we talked at length about the idea that of God really giving them details up to the point of giving names for people that weren't going to be around for like 200 years. Okay. And talking about God as the only one who saves. And some of that. Really, the point of it is that I'm not like your idols who can't do anything. I actually can move. And so now in 46, he's going to get a specific again. He's going to talk about the gods of Babylon. Okay. And in some ways, what he's dealing with is he's probably dealing with the fact that there's some of that going on right at this point, that they're starting to worship the idols of Babylon. And then later, even more so, because they will spend 70 years in Babylon. So don't worship their gods. Okay. So it goes on. It says, Bel bows down and Nebo stoops. These are names of Babylonian gods. Their idols are on beasts and livestock. These things you carry are borne as burdens on weary beasts. So here's kind of the idea. So Bel and Nebo are weak, and their idols have to be carried around on livestock. So what impressive gods that, they can't even move themselves. They had to be carried around. They stoop, they bow down together. They cannot save the burden, but themselves go into captivity. Okay. So listen to me, O house of Jacob, all the remnant of the house of Israel, who have been born by me from before your birth, carried from the womb. Okay, so now here's the contrast. Bel and Nebo are carried around on beasts of burden. Okay, the children of Israel have been carried by God. So God does the carrying where the idols have to be carried.
He's telling them this one.
Yeah. So he's making a contrast. He goes, who have been born by me, who have been carried by me from before your birth, carried from the womb, even to your old age. I am he, and to gray hairs I will carry you. I have made and I will bear. I will carry and will save. Now notice the first two verses where we talk about Bel and Nebo. They are carried. They cannot save. They cannot protect. God says, in response, I can protect. I can carry. I can save.
I like that a lot.
Okay. So then in verse 5, God asks a question. To whom will you liken me and make me equal and compare me that we may be alike? So, okay, Israel, who are you going to compare me to? What God are you going to compare me to? What idol are you going to compare me to? What are you going to... Okay. Those who lavish gold from the purse and weigh out silver in the scales. They hire a goldsmith and make it into a god, and then they fall down and worship. So notice the picture, okay? They provide all the materials.
Yeah.
They pay the guy to make it, and then they bow down and worship it.
And carry it as they're carrying it on their animals.
And then it says, they lift it to their shoulder, they carry it. They set it in its place, and it stands there. It cannot move from its place. If one cries to it, it does not answer or save him from his trouble. In fact, in one of the other prophets, he goes, and if it's not quite stable, they nail it to the mantle.
There it is.
Nail it down so it doesn't fall over.
Yeah, for safekeeping. Yeah.
So remember that the primary issue here is contrast between God, who says, I've carried you, I have bore you, I have saved you, I have protected you, I have walked with you. And the idols that you're running after, they cannot do anything for you. Okay, so making a god. Okay, and then in verse 8, remember this and stand firm. Okay, recall it to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things of old. So what is going on? Well, they're running after idols. So remember the difference between what I have always been for you and the idols that you're chasing now.
It's pretty straightforward. I mean, you think they
Uh-huh.
catch on. It's like I see that in the Bible a lot. I think he's like, just like you said, boom, 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 and they're like, I don't understand. Bye.
So he goes on and he says, "For I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me." And then he comes back to what he talked about in 44 and 45, declaring the end from the beginning. Okay, and so we've talked at length about this, but he mentions a name named Cyrus as a king. And Cyrus is born some 150 years after this is written. But not only does he name him by name, he names what his task is going to be by name.
Is that the only one who does that?
Oh no,
Oh no.
but it's a primary one. Okay, so declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things not yet done, saying, "My counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose." Okay, calling a bird of prey from the east, the man of my counsel from a far country. I have spoken, and I will bring it to pass. I have purposed, and I will do it. Now, it's not by name this time, but once again, he's bringing up the discussion of the one who's going to come. Now, in this case, we're probably dealing with Babylon, because he's saying, I'm going to call a bird of prey from the east. So what is he doing? He's calling a predator from the east, from a far country, to punish the children of Israel for their idolatry. And remember, he's spoken directly of Babylon. Well, Babylon in about 100 years is going to come and going to sack Jerusalem and basically leave it desolate. Well, I've called them. So God even is steadfast enough to go, look, when they show up, I sent them.
This is because I said so.
Well, why did he send them? Well, because they hadn't been obedient.
At all. They weren't
Right.
They weren't
And
getting it.
he comes further into that. He goes, listen to me, you stubborn of heart, you who are far from righteousness. I bring near my righteousness. It is not far off, and my salvation will not delay. I will put salvation in Zion, for Israel my glory. So you guys who are stubborn and are not paying attention, you're going to see my righteousness. You're going to see my salvation. Okay. Then he goes on and still talking about Babylon. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne. Remember, once again, we're discussing Cyrus, we're discussing all of that. The Babylonians come and are a major power for about 100 years. And then Cyrus, who is from Persia, sacks Babylon, destroys all their power. Well, that's what this is. Okay, daughter of Babylon, come and sit in the dust. Sit on the ground without your throne, because I'm taking all your power. Okay, sit on the ground without a throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for you shall no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind flour. Put off your veil. Strip off your robe. Uncover your legs. Pass through the rivers. Your nakedness shall be uncovered, and your disgrace shall be seen. So going from fine clothes, fine all of that, to slavery, and really the idea your nakedness shall be uncovered, it's shame.
Yeah.
Okay. I will take vengeance, and I will spare no one. So here is an interesting, and we've talked about it a little bit with Assyria, but we'll get into it here. One of the things that you will often find when you see the judgment against the nation of Israel in the Old Testament is this idea. God calls on a foreign people of pagans, of people of unbelievers, and he sends them to punish Israel for their sin. Okay. But there is an idea that they come in as pagans. They are his act of punishment. And then as part of his redemptive process, he then punishes the nation that has, because they have gone too far, is typically the idea.
They always do seem to go too
They
far.
do.
Don't they?
Right after he tells him exactly what he's going to do, yeah.
Okay. But the truth of the matter is, just because God used their, so here's the premise. Okay. Just because God uses a person's sin to further his agenda does not mean that that sin will not be punished. Okay. There are times that even in our failure, we do what God has planned. Okay. Use an example of this. Okay. So this is kind of a weird way of looking at it, but if you look at the Third Reich, if you look at Nazi Germany, okay, starting in 1939, well, one of the greatest atrocities they committed is they killed about 6.5 million Jews. Okay. Horrendous time and rampant wickedness. Okay. That wickedness leads to the fact it is mainly because of those events between 1939 and 1945 that in 1948 the United Nations says we're going to give part of their homeland back to the Jews. So all of that served a purpose.
Right.
However, it does not make it not wicked, and it does not make it such that God is not going to punish the ones who did it. That is what we're getting at. Babylon was a tool in the hand of God, but their wickedness is not wiped out because of that. And so now they are receiving the just reward for their wickedness.
So
Okay.
it's not condoned. Their evilness is not condoned,
Right.
even though it's being used to punish the Israelites.
Exactly. Okay, it is a very difficult sometimes thing to look at. Let's use a New Testament example. Okay, Judas. Okay, so Judas betrays Jesus, right?
Yes.
Okay,
He does.
how many times before that he's going to do it? Several times.
Several times, yes.
Okay. That does not mean that Judas does not suffer the consequences for his action. Okay. Now, some people will say, well, he didn't have a choice, obviously, because God knew beforehand. No, that's
No,
not
he
the
had a
case.
choice.
No,
He
we
still
have
had a choice.
Yeah.
He spent 3.5 years next to Jesus and missed it.
And if he had chose something different, then it would have happened in a different way.
Well, but remember that the trick is that God knows what he was going to choose.
Yes.
And he's still teaching now to this day. So,
Uh-huh.
there's also a reason.
But just because Judas was a tool in God's hand because of his disobedience does not mean he's not culpable for what he did. Okay. So this part in 47 is speaking of what God is going to do to Babylon because of their sinfulness. Okay. One example of that comes in the book of Daniel. And when you get to chapter 6, sorry, not chapter 6, I think it's chapter 4 of the book of Daniel, you see the very last night of the Babylonian kingdom. Okay. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that real quick. Daniel 4. I think it's 4. Nope, it's 5. 5. Okay. So at the beginning of Daniel 5, so to give you kind of a rundown of all this, Daniel 1 through 4 all deal with King Nebuchadnezzar, which is the king that takes the Jews into captivity. Okay. And we see God move in Nebuchadnezzar's life through Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Chapter 5 begins with King Belshazzar, who is a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. He's actually his grandson. Okay. And so we see King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the thousands. So he's having a wild party. Okay. And it says in verse 2, it says, Belshazzar, when he had tasted the wine, so when he was plenty drunk is the idea, he commanded the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, and it says father, but that word means his ancestor.
A male
So
descendant.
it means a male ancestor. So grandfather is where this fits. Had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought.
Oh, no.
So understand the idea. So when Nebuchadnezzar sacks Jerusalem, he gathers together all of the, and I mean, we are talking about probably millions of dollars worth of utensils, because like the plates, the cups, and all that were solid gold
Yeah.
and solid silver. And he took them all to Babylon, and they'd been in storage in Babylon. Belshazzar decides that he's going to go a step further and really show how bad he is. And he takes them and uses it for, and let's call it what it is. He brings the holy vessels dedicated to the worship of God to be used for an orgy.
Oh, that's horrid.
Okay.
That is horrid.
Everything is horrid.
Okay. So they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the kings and his lords, his wives and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver and bronze and iron, wood and stone. So they brought the holy vessels for the worship of the Lord and used them to worship their idols and to have a party. And in verse 5, it says, immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand. Okay, we're verse 5.
Thank you.
Chapter 5, verse 5. So literally they're in this room, they're in the throne room. So this is a very well-appointed place. And suddenly they see a hand show up. And it begins to scratch words into the wall.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it is literally, the idea is it is a disembodied hand.
Yeah, right.
And it begins to scratch words into the wall. Okay. Daniel 5.
That's why I was
Daniel
lost.
5, verse 5. Sorry, I moved.
5, 7. They saw fingers of human.
Okay, sorry.
That would be super scary.
Uh-huh. Okay. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. So the king looks over and sees this hand writing big letters on the wall. And it says, immediately the king's color changed.
Oh, I'll bet it did.
His mouth probably went.
Pick it up off the floor.
And it says, now watch, and his thoughts alarmed him, his limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. So he was freaking out.
Yeah.
Chapter 5. So a couple chapters back. Right there. 5. Probably.
Okay, stop yawning.
I needed somebody to like walk on my
All right,
back.
there we go. Chapter 5, and then
That'd be awesome.
right here. Opposite the wall. It's okay.
Okay.
So immediately the king's color changed. His thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way and his knees knocked together. The king called loudly to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers. So his magicians and his wise men. And the king declared to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom.
Get a major glow up.
Okay, so he gonna be powerful.
The power.
Okay. Then all the wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation.
What was it? The writing? Like what was
It's going to tell us in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed. His color changed and his lords were perplexed. And then the queen comes and says, hey, I have an idea for you. There's this guy that your grandfather used to spend a lot of time talking to you named Belteshazzar or Daniel. Okay. And I just want you to know that he was like the smartest guy around.
Yeah.
Okay. And so maybe he can help. Now, Daniel, if we're reading this correctly, Daniel was a younger man, maybe in his late teens. Okay. When he went to Babylon, he is now in his 80s or 90s.
Okay.
Okay. So he's an old man now. Then Daniel was brought in before the king. And the king answered and said to Daniel, you are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, who the king my father brought from Judah. I have heard of you that the spirit of the gods is with you, that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now, the wise men couldn't tell me, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So he says, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you can tell me what this means, I will give you all these super great gifts. Okay. And then Daniel answers, this is verse 17. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, keep your gifts. Let your gifts be for yourself and give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, kingship and greatness and glory and majesty. And because of the greatness he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. And he goes on to talk about all the things that Nebuchadnezzar did. And then he brings up something that had happened to Nebuchadnezzar in the chapter before this in Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar got a little big for his britches and thought he was a little better than he was. And God drove him insane.
Oh.
And it says that literally he gets run out of the kingdom. And it says that he begins to eat grass like a cow, and he has fingernails like talons of an eagle and hair like feathers. And he's crazy for like 7 years. And then God restores his sanity.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And so Daniel mentions all of this. Okay. And it says until he was fed grass like an ox and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he will. That's verse 21. And you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this, but you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven. And the vessels of his house you have brought in before you. You and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them, and you praise the gods of gold and silver and bronze and iron and wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. But the God in whose hand is your breath and whose are all your ways, you have not honored. So notice the idol thing. You've worshiped all these idols who can't do anything, but the one who actually holds your breath in his hand, you haven't honored him. So, verse 24, then from his presence the hand was sent, and this writing was inscribed. And this is the writing that was inscribed. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. Okay, 4 words. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. So some of you think of movies where it goes, you've been weighed and been measured, but you've been found wanting. There's some movies that will use that quote. That's where this comes from. And then it says, Perez, okay, which is the parson, it's the key to this. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. So this is what it actually says. So Belshazzar tells Belshazzar, you're not going to make it through the end of the night.
Your kingdom's gone.
Your kingdom's gone
Your
tonight.
Hope you enjoyed that party, buddy.
And it says, by the way, it says, Belshazzar gives the command in Daniel's coat in purple and a chain of gold put around his neck and a proclamation that he should be third ruler in the kingdom. And then it says, that very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So literally that very night.
Yeah.
Okay. So I bring this up to help you understand that the key here, we're going back to Isaiah now. Okay. The key here is, in fact, history will tell us that as Cyrus the Persian is coming in, the people of Babylon are cheering the one who's coming in to conquer them
Because they hate their kids
because
so
they were in
much.
such a bad place. Okay. So I will spare no one, our Redeemer. Okay. Sit in silence. This is verse 5 of Isaiah 47. So we're all the way back to Isaiah, chapter 47. Okay. Sit in silence and go into darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for you shall no more be called the mistress of kingdoms. I was angry with my people. I profaned my heritage. I gave them into your hand. So now watch. I was angry with my people, and I was upset with my own. And so I moved. I profaned my heritage. I gave them into your hand, and you showed them no mercy. On the aged, you made your yoke exceedingly heavy. You said, I will be mistress forever, so that you did not lay these things to heart or remember their end. So here's part of what he's saying is one of the things that you didn't do is you should have recognized, if I would do this to my own people, what will I do to you if you don't obey? Almost sounds like a mafia movie. It really,
yeah,
it really
we're
does.
there.
Now, therefore, hear this, you lover of pleasures, who sit securely and who say in your heart, I am, and there is no one besides me. I shall not sit as a widow or know the loss of my children. I will. So what is he saying? I'll be secure. I will never know anything but good times.
Yep.
These two things shall come to you in a moment, in one day. The loss of children and widowhood shall come upon you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and the great power of your enchantments. Now watch, this is so powerful here. What does God promise to do to Babylon here?
To conquer, to
Yeah,
lose
he's
the
gonna
children,
kill
to
them.
kill
But
them all.
but what's the time frame he gives here?
One day.
In a moment,
Yeah.
in one day.
One day.
Oh yeah. So it'll be a moment literally in one day.
So literally, think about this. Belshazzar's throwing the big party,
Yeah.
and before that day is over,
He's dead.
it's over.
Yeah. And the same thing with Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Before
Okay.
the night's end, you're going to be gone.
So before it ever happens, he says it's going to be over in a day. And you thought that you were secure and that no one would ever do anything to you? Nope, that's not how this is going to work. You felt secure in your wickedness, and you said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and your knowledge led you astray, and you said in your heart, now watch, this is such an interesting thing that goes on. Remember that in chapter 45 and chapter 46, we saw multiple times this, I am God, and beside me there is no other. Okay, now watch what Babylon is saying. They're saying the same thing. I am, and beside me there is no other. They are elevating themselves
Above
it, yeah.
to the level of God.
Yeah.
But evil shall come upon you, which you will not know how to charm away. Disaster shall fall upon you, for which you will not be able to atone. And ruin shall come upon you suddenly, of which you know nothing. Now, another history thing here. History tells us that the way the Persians took Babylon so fast is Babylon was on a river and there'd been a drought, and so the river levels, and the watchmen were asleep.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
And
you
so
don't
they
want to be
literally
caught
slipped
sleeping.
under and sacked it in a night.
Nice.
So, of which you know nothing.
Yep.
It will be such a surprise you won't even be ready. Stand fast in your enchantments and your many sorceries with which you have labored from your youth. Perhaps you may be able to succeed. Perhaps you may inspire terror. You are wearied with your many counsels. Let them stand forth and save you. So here he's talking about idols. Oh, you're wearied with how many idols you have. Maybe they'll be able to save you. Those who divide the heavens. So now he's talking about wise men too. He's talking about astrologers. Those who divide the heavens and who gaze at the stars, who at the new moons make known what shall come upon you.
Month by month.
So the idols, the sorcerers, the enchanters, the astrologers, maybe they can save you.
Maybe.
So I don't know if you have noticed this. I think you probably have. But one of the things that the Bible tends to do sometimes, and when it talks about pagan cultures, God is very condescending towards them. God is very sarcastic towards them. The best example ever is the story of Mount Carmel with Elijah. So Elijah is alone standing against 400 pagan prophets.
Wow.
And he makes a deal with them and he says, okay, here's my plan. Here's what I'm going to do. Each of us is going to build an altar. Okay. And each of us is going to dress a sacrifice on that altar and put the wood and get everything. The one thing you can't do is you can't light it. Okay. You can't light it yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to pray. And as we pray, we're going to ask God to send fire from heaven to do the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Elijah goes, and just because I want to be fair, I'll let you go first. So they start early in the morning and they prepare the sacrifice and they build their beautiful altar and all that. And actually, they probably wouldn't have had to build one because there was probably already one there. So they've got home turf.
Home turf for daddy.
Okay. And so they begin to pray to their gods. To Baal is the one here. And nothing happens. And so 1 hour goes by, 2 hours goes by, 3 hours goes by, 4 hours goes by. Now it's noon. It's the heat of the day. And they're so antsy by this point that it says that they begin to pull out blades and cut themselves, hoping that showing blood will get him to answer. And at that point, Elijah, in the spirit of the NBA, begins to talk trash. And he begins by saying, well, maybe you need to yell louder. Hey, maybe he's asleep. Maybe this is his week off. At one point, he says, maybe he's on the toilet.
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe it's the bathroom game.
Okay. So we get to the end of this and they're finally so exhausted they can't go on. And it's probably 3 or 4 in the afternoon now. They've been going for hours.
God knows.
And Elijah goes, and so now they're finally done because they've been cutting themselves, blood loss, all that. They're done.
Yeah.
And there were 400 of them. And Elijah goes, okay, hold on, let's it's my turn now. And so he gets a couple of guys and he says, you see those big jars of water over those big jugs? And they were like 25-gallon jugs, big clay pots. And he goes, I want you to go fill those with water. And so he goes, fills them with water. And he says, now I want you to dump it over my sacrifice. And then he says, now go do it again. And he says they dug a trench around it.
So to keep it wet.
Okay. He poured water to the point that the trench is completely full. There's water running out of the trench. All the wood's wet. The sacrifice is wet. All the rocks are wet. Okay. And then he literally prays 2 sentences, basically. He says, Lord, I want you to hear me. Show yourself today. It's a little more than that, but that's basically all it is. Fire comes down from heaven, consumes the sacrifice, consumes all the wood, consumes all the rocks, consumes all the ground, consumes all the water.
Obliterates it all.
Okay.
So after that, why would you believe in idols?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But usually, you would think they would have already not. But
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 look at us today. We're still believing
But
in idols.
this is an important element to this, is that God, his hatred for idols is based on their worthlessness. Okay. In fact,
Ezekiel, which is another one of the prophets around this time, if you really look at the Hebrew carefully, he calls idols dung. So literally in today's vernacular, he would be saying, your idols are pieces of crap.
Yeah.
It's rather harsh. Okay. So he has come in and said, okay, so your idols aren't worthless. So maybe your enchanters and your magicians will help you. I mean, they can read the stars and all this sort of stuff. And he says, behold, they are like stubble. Okay. Now, stubble is after you've harvested a field, the bits that are left over after the combine is run through is stubble. So basically it's dry tinder.
Yeah.
And fire consumes them. They cannot deliver themselves from the power of the flame. No coal for warming oneself is this, no fire to sit beside. So he even explains it. He says it this way. He says they're like stubble. They're consumed by fire. They can't deliver themselves from the power of the flame. And he says, this isn't the kind of fire you'd sit beside to roast hot dogs. This is an inferno.
What verse is that?
Verse 14 of Isaiah 47. Okay. And then 15 to close the chapter says, such to you are those with whom you have labored, who you have done business with from your youth. They wander about, each in his own direction. There is no one to save you. I know we're a bit early, but we're going to stop there. We'll pick up at 48 next time.
Which will be Wednesday, right?
Wednesday at
I keep,
5:30.
I'm trying to get there. I keep forgetting
Well,
about Wednesdays.
if you miss one and want to, we're
Online.
we're recording them.
Oh.
Yeah, on Facebook, right?
They're on
She's told me that
Facebook and
before.
they're on YouTube.
And on YouTube, because I looked them up on, I watched
Check
it
you
before.
out. You're like a superstar.